in my opponent. I would like to start off with what he had mentioned, begin with his first counterclaim, that inflation has changed slightly, but the minimum wage hasn't, and how he said that the way that it's changed hasn't really made a difference, or it hasn't really impacted anything. Yeah, the inflation has changed, although slightly, but it still has changed, and as mentioned before by my peer, minimum wage hasn't been changed for years at all. So yes, inflation has been changed slightly, but minimum wage hasn't been changed at all. So I have a quote from to counter what he said about the purchasing power and how it hasn't changed, it hasn't been moved, or the purchasing power doesn't move at all. From the Pew Research Center. A quote from D. Silver Drew, since it was last raised in 2009 to the current $7.25 per hour, the federal minimum has lost about 8.1 of its purchasing power to inflation. So I have evidence that proves that the purchasing power has stayed the same. It hasn't, it has changed, it hasn't stayed the same. And to counteract the inflation in the poverty line, and how that raising the minimum wage is not going to push anybody out of the poverty line. I have evidence from the Economic Policy Institute that says up until early 1980s, the annual minimum wage income after adjusting for inflation was enough to keep a family of 2 above the poverty line at its high point in 1968. The minimum wage has high enough for a family of 3 to be above the poverty line with the earnings of a full-time minimum wage worker, although it still falls short for a family of 4. So basically, since all that time ago, raising and how it's affected raising the minimum wage till now, it doesn't really make sense to say that raising the minimum wage now in today's day and age, that it won't push anybody up out of the poverty line, or that it won't push as many people above the poverty line. And then he had stated that the companies are going to raise prices, and that that's not going to it's going to basically my point is that companies are not going to raise all their prices. So as they may raise, let's say at Starbucks or like McDonald's, they may raise a Big Mac meal to a couple cents up. It's not going to raise their whole entire menu, so it's not going to really affect the minimum wage workers and their spending or their purchasing powers, because companies, again, they're not dumb. They're not going to raise their whole menu price and all at once. So also he had mentioned about layoffs and how that's going to affect the companies are going to start laying off workers, but he has no evidence to say that that's what they're going to do to cut expenses. I'm pretty sure that companies are going to find many different ways to cut expenses, and they don't necessarily have to lay off of workers, especially for a minimum wage increase. So I have a quote from the journalist resource in an article about the effects of raising minimum wage, and stating that overall price increases are modest. For example, a 10% increase in the minimum wage would increase food prices no more than 4%, and overall prices by no more than 0.4%, significantly less than the minimum wage increase. So again, companies are not going to raise all their prices at once, and that's not going to really affect or have such a big effect as he had previously